Unless you've been stuck in a Viltrumite prison for the last year, I'm sure you've heard of Invincible. And while I'm sure my brothers would argue otherwise, I know for a fact the Viltrumites are way too powerful for the 40k universe. But I'm sure with a little bit of home brewing and the right proxies, we can bring them to your tabletop. To begin gathering intel for this homebrew, we're gonna have to start with the origins and history of the Viltrumite Empire. Originating from the death world of Viltrum, the planet's brutal gravity and dense atmosphere meant living here was a struggle for everyone. And like the death worlds of Katachan and Fenris, those raised here would stand above the rest and become the pinnacle of evolution. This would create the Viltrumites, the ultimate warrior race. Well, next to the Saiyans, that is. Ironically, Planet Vegeta and Viltrum would both go through something very similar later on in the series. This is going to be spoilers for the comics and later seasons of the show, just to be warned for everyone. For a time, the Viltrumites were on track to conquer the entire universe, and no one could stand in their way. It wasn't until their emperor was assassinated and a virus tailor-made to their genetic code was created that the Viltrumites were finally stopped. Millions died from the virus and millions more were killed while struggling to recover. In the end, only 50 of them would be left alive by the start of the series. Less than enough to have a stable genetic pool to work with, and it would force the Viltrumites, a race focused on genetic purity, to look elsewhere, and one day hope to restore the glory of the Viltrumite Empire. Now this is where I'll be spoiling a little bit of stuff to happen in the comics, so just be aware. Later on in the series, the Viltrumites are finally restored, and eventually, thanks to the efforts of Grand Regent Thrag alongside Mark Grayson, force of the Viltrumite Empire would rise once again, and thousands would join their ranks. Of course, the origin is only one part of the process. To really flesh out this homebrew, we're going to need to go deeper. So, let's begin by covering the Viltrumites' weapons, armor, and abilities. First off on their list of abilities, and the one they share with Sanguinius, is the ability of flight. Viltrumites are able to push off any surface, regardless of distance or mass. This makes it possible for them to not only sustain flight in atmosphere, but allows them to travel in the vacuum of space. More than that, Viltrumites can hold their breath for up to 2 solar weeks. And how they do all this, you guys might be wondering, and the answer is pretty simple. They just will themselves to do it. Viltrumites can control smart atoms, and it's this ability that gives them all of their powers. These atomic nanomachines allow Viltrumites to control their own atomic structure and its properties. Forget mind over matter, these guys can literally control the state of the matter with their mind. And it's actually because of the smart atoms that the Viltrumites have their superior strength at all. And while there isn't an exact measurement, it's needless to say Viltrumites are so many times stronger than a human. In fact, I don't even think a named unhelmeted space marine could stop them. And to round out the abilities the Viltrumites have, alongside super strength, they also have healing factor so intense it would actually impress Wolverine of all people. Literally, at one point in the comic, Mark literally regrows his entire spine back. Though that of course assumes you can actually manage to harm the Viltrumites, as with all superhuman beings, they are incredibly durable, to the point of basically being immune to all forms of damage. These guys literally have a feel no pain +2 with a reroll 1 type sustain. Nothing short of a virus crafted specifically to kill them can actually threaten them, and in some cases, even that isn't enough. If they do manage to survive the virus, they end up becoming even stronger to the point nothing can actually stop them. Overall, this is an utterly stacked list of abilities, and by far the strongest faction I've covered so far. Which means picking a faction for this homebrew might be a tad bit difficult, so make sure to stick around to find out which one I pick. But first, let's get to covering the methods of war of the Viltrumites, so we can see what units and army detachments to focus on for this build. The Viltrumites operate by infiltrating an underdeveloped world and establishing themselves as a trusted authority and hero figure. From there, they'll work to interbreed with the planet's population, and every Viltrumite child born is another soldier for the Empire's ranks, and another threat the universe will have to face. And if you guys ever question just how deadly 2 Viltrumites are, here's a heads up, it only takes 3 to break a planet. And speaking of breaking planets, while stealth and infiltration are their opening moves, Viltrumites are ruthless when provoked. Adopting a shock and awe approach to their methods of conquest, they demonstrate their power to inspire utter fear in the population. Resistance isn't just futile against the Viltrumites, in some cases, it's fucking welcomed. I just hope Terra's defenses are enough. And by the way, thanks for making it this far into the video. If you want to continue seeing more of this content, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and hit that bell and hype icons too. Make sure YouTube's Machine Spirit hears your prayers and this growing community. Now then, let's get to covering some honorable homebrews. For the first suggestion in our list of homebrews, we've got the kin from the Leagues of Votan. These genetically cloned abhumans are insanely durable, being able to survive in the vacuum of space much like the Viltrumites. Alongside that, their dense frames make them incredibly strong proportional to even the greatest humans. And while they are classified as Xenos, much like the Viltrumites, the squats aren't exactly what we're going to be looking for this homebrew, unfortunately. As for another Xenos faction I was considering for this homebrew, I was actually considering the Tau of all people. The Crisis Suits bring strength 5 to the table alongside most of them having the ability to fly and an optional upgrade for a feel no pain or invulnerability save. That's a huge list of comparisons to the Viltrumites. But honestly the Tau are a closer fit for Tet Jacket and the Geldarians in the Invincible universe. So maybe we can do a homebrew on them at some point later on. They are literally short, weak, blue skin aliens who use power armor to compensate for their weakness. So, unfortunately, no, we will not be using the Tau for this homebrew. The Viltrumites may be Xenos, but at the end of it all, they're a race of warriors bred for war and conquest. More than that, not only are they far beyond humans, but they always work in small teams. Now, while that might be because they're nearly all dead, it still fits incredibly well with this homebrew. And like my brother Girly Man says, all that's needed to conquer a planet is 100 Astartes. That's right, we're picking Space Marines for this homebrew. Maybe it's cliche, maybe you disagree. However, I think the Space Marines fit perfectly. And honestly, the only issue I can think of is the fact that Space Marines are all male, which isn't a complete game breaker given the whole mustache situation going with the Viltrumites, you know? Could even say it's a weird gene mutation that all the Astartes in this chapter grow sick-ass mustaches. I don't know, it's your homebrew, do crazy shit, I don't care. Space Marines are genetically and chemically engineered to be the finest warriors, many of which find themselves living on hostile death worlds much like Viltrum. More than that, the Scourge virus isn't too dissimilar from the genophage virus created to wipe out all the Space Marines that we see in the End of the Death. Therefore, I think it'd be really fitting to build this homebrew around that idea of a gene-ravaged chapter. Something like maybe a chapter that's been reduced to 50 Astartes or maybe even less. I imagine they'd conquer worlds and begin radically screening and testing candidates, very similar to what the Space Sharks or Carcharodons do. Probably doing it to cure some sort of permanent mutation. But before we work out the homebrew part of this video, we need to first figure out how to build this army. So get your pen and paper out and prepare to bring this army to your tabletop. As always, I like to take the combat patrol of the army I'm homebrewing, and Space Marines have a wide range of options. However, after analyzing all of our data alongside considering potential proxies, the choice is clear. The Raven Guard Combat Patrol is perfect for bringing the Viltrumites to Warhammer 40k. First off, this box comes with 6 flying units, a jump pack captain, and 5 jump pack intercessors. These are great stand-ins for the Viltrumites while airborne. Plus, I could see some pretty insane Thrag kit bashes with that cape that captain has on. Meanwhile, the Insult Intercessors can give your opponent the full Omni-Man treatment with the Hammer of Wrath ability. Alongside that, though, you get a 10-man unit of Intercessors, because obviously the Viltrumites are going to be using these guys. More than that, though, the Omni Scramblers make these guys great disruption units, which is actually pretty fitting with how Cecil keeps himself at a distance every time he deep strikes in around Nolan in Season 1. And for my favorite proxy in this box, we have the Invector Warsuit, and they are the perfect stand-in for...
Stand ready for my arrival, worm.
I know this big man can fly, so technically that is a point against him as a proxy. However, the Invector Warsuit comes with the Scout 8 ability. This means that while he might not be flying around the battlefield destroying cities with just his body, it can definitely get deep into the enemy's front line, and that's basically pure conquest. Just make sure you give him some reinforcements. We all know how lonely Conquest can get. What's wild about this box, especially when compared to the other homebrews I've done on this channel, is that this thing is basically 500 points exactly, coming up to a total of 490 points. Though I think that's mostly because the 10 infiltrators are hugely overcosted. In terms of rules, I choose the Raven Guard themed Vanguard Spearhead detachment. Despite being a stealth themed detachment, this thing gives you some crazy durability, especially with a highly mobile army, allowing you to stay 12 inches away from your enemy at all times. If you don't know, the Vanguard Spearhead makes it so that as long as any unit in your army is more than 12 inches away, your opponent subtracts 1 from their hit rolls, which is actually pretty relevant given the Viltrumites' high reaction speed and durability, with the second effect actually reflecting that almost perfectly. You see, if a unit gets hit while they're 12 inches away, they actually get the benefits of cover, which means that unit gets a +1 to their save rolls. The only thing that's really missing for this army though, and something I'd probably buy later on, is an Apothecary. That way we can actually have some crazy regen in this army and further reflect the Viltrumites' insane healing factor. But other than that, this is everything you need to bring the Viltrumites to your tabletop. The Heralds of Argol are a chapter of Space Marines from an unknown founding. The rumor suggests them to be of the Curse founding. an assumption that became increasingly more likely as their mutations began to take effect. Prior to that, though, the Heralds were some of the mightiest of the Astartes chapters. The Astartes were notable for their long lives and impressive physical abilities. However, the Heralds were above even them. Many claim this to be a byproduct of the gene tampering done to their gene seed during their founding, intentionally layering beneficial mutations and genetic deviations to create Space Marines who are truly invincible. Initially, they were content with the death world of Viltrum as their fief, but slowly, as their honors grew, so did their domain. Beginning with garrisons on nearby worlds, outposts, and distant systems, soon no one could question what many suspected. The Heralds were legion building. The Viltrumite crusades on the chapter, now some 10,000 Marines, pushed into nearby sectors, demanding submission wherever they went. Entire populations were cowed to their rulership and sent to the battle to die on their behalf, at least for a time. As suddenly as they advanced, the Heralds retreated, and no one understood why, at least until the 10th Company of the chapter had arrived in Imperial space. Known as the Grayson Company, the Astartes had suffered a terrible scourge. Their gene seed had started collapsing genetically, awakening cancers and mutations throughout the entire Astartes chapter. The Grayson Company was already in the midst of dying, but before the last of them perished, they revealed a startling secret. No more than 50 of the chapter had survived. By the grace of the God Emperor, the Heralds of Argol were routed, and the planet Viltrum was destroyed. However, despite the Imperium's best efforts, the Heralds of Argol survived. The 50 traitors hide between worlds and in the shadows of moons. Not out of fear. They prepare, having spent their time searching for a new world to call their own, and make the base of their new empire. Where are the Heralds of Argol now? Let me know how you continue this story in the comment section below. And if you like this homebrew, why not watch another one of my videos? Maybe set up your own crossover battle between the Viltrumites and another faction on my channel, like the Stormtroopers from Star Wars. Or maybe go back to one of my earliest videos and throw them at the Terminids from Helldivers. Either way, thanks for watching to the end, and remember, there's no wrong way to commit heresy. Bye!